There is a town on the southern border of the northern kingdom of Israel called Bethel. And on a bright morning, almost 3,000 years ago, the sun comes up over that town and catches something new, something gold. It is a calf, cast in metal, standing on a stone platform where the whole town can see it. A king stands in front of it. His name is Jeroboam, and he lifts his voice to the people who have gathered, and he says words that will echo through 200 years of blood. He says, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." And the people bow. Now hold that picture in your mind. A lifeless thing of hammered gold, standing at the edge of a town nobody outside Israel has ever heard of. Because I want to tell you something about that calf, and I want you to remember I told you this. That calf is going to outlive the man who built it. It is going to outlive his son and his son's murderer, and the murderer after that. 2 centuries from the morning it first caught the sun, kings will still be dying over it, and it will still be standing. This is not a story about one bad king. This is not a story about one bad decision. This is not a story about a nation that simply lost its way. This is a story about a sin that learned how to inherit. Because here is what the northern kingdom of Israel actually was. Over roughly 200 years, 19 men sat on its throne, 19 kings from 9 different families. And the Bible renders a verdict on every single one of them. Not most of them. Not the majority. Everyone. The same sentence, king after king after king, like a bell tolling in the dark. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. Not one good king. Not one. Think about that. In the southern kingdom, in Judah, you at least get a few bright spots. A Hezekiah, a Josiah. Kings who tear down idols and turn the people back. But in the north? The scoreboard reads 19-0, 19 kings, and every last one of them condemned. And it gets worse, because that throne was not just cursed, it was deadly. Of those 19 kings, roughly half did not die in their beds. They were murdered, stabbed by their own commanders, cut down in coups, burned alive in their own palaces. The crown of Israel was not something you inherited peacefully. It was something men killed to reach, and then died to keep. So here's the question this whole video is going to answer for you. How does a nation go 200 years without producing one single good king? How does the same sin survive 9 different dynasties, when every dynasty is trying to erase the one before it? And what finally happens when a people spends 2 centuries refusing to tear down a calf? Stay with me, because the pattern you're about to see is one that nobody in that kingdom survived. Not the good men, not the strong men, not the reformers with blood on their swords. Nobody. It starts with the man standing in front of the gold. So let's start with him. To understand why Jeroboam built that calf, you have to understand what he was afraid of. Jeroboam was not born a king. He was a working man, a foreman. Under King Solomon, he supervised labor crews from the tribes of Joseph, the men who hauled stone and carried timber for the king's building projects. He was good at it. Solomon noticed him. And then a prophet named Ahijah found him on a road outside Jerusalem, tore his own new cloak into 12 pieces, and handed Jeroboam 10 of them. 10 tribes, the prophet said. God is going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's family, and he is giving 10 tribes to you. And it happened. When Solomon died, his son Rehoboam was such a fool, such an arrogant boy, that the 10 northern tribes walked out, and they made Jeroboam their king, just like the prophet said. So here's a man who is handed a kingdom by God himself, through a prophet, as a gift. And within months, he does the one thing that dooms it. Here's what most people miss. Jeroboam's sin did not come from unbelief. It came from fear. He looks at his new kingdom, and he does the math. The temple, the real temple, the house of God, is in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is in the southern kingdom now, enemy territory. And Jeroboam thinks to himself, if my people keep walking south to worship at that temple, sooner or later their hearts will follow their feet. They will want the old king back. They will kill me. So he builds a shortcut to God. 2 of them. One golden calf at Bethel in the south of his territory, one at Dan in the far north. Worship here, he tells them. You don't need Jerusalem anymore. Behold your gods. There is a Hebrew word for what he did. The word is chata. We translate it to sin. But the picture buried inside that word is an archer. Chata means to shoot at a target and miss. And the Bible does not simply say Jeroboam sinned. It says, over and over, that he made Israel to chata. He made Israel miss. He took the aim of a whole nation, the aim of 10 tribes, and he pulled it off target. Not for one bad afternoon, forever. That is the phrase that gets welded to his name for the rest of Scripture. Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. And God sends him a warning he cannot possibly misunderstand. The same prophet who gave him the kingdom, Ahijah, now speaks a curse over his house. Every male in Jeroboam's family will be cut off. His line will be swept away the way a man sweeps away dung. That is the actual image the prophet uses. Not gently, not poetically, like refuse. Jeroboam hears it, and he keeps the calves. Now watch what happens next. Jeroboam dies, and his son Nadab takes the throne. Nadab reigns 2 years. 2 years. And then, during a military siege, one of his own officers, a man named Baasha, murders him. And Baasha does not stop there. He hunts down every last member of Jeroboam's family, every son, every heir. He does not leave one person breathing. He erases the entire dynasty. And I want you to feel how strange this is. Baasha thinks he is being ambitious. He thinks he is grabbing power, but he is actually a blade in the hand of a curse. Every murder he commits is a line the prophet already wrote. God said Jeroboam's house would be swept away like dung. And here comes Baasha with the broom, not even knowing whose hand he is. But here's the part that should make the hair stand up on your neck. Baasha wipes out Jeroboam's family for their sin, and then Baasha keeps the calves. He walked in the way of Jeroboam, the Bible says, and in his sin which he made Israel to sin. The man who executed the last dynasty for its idolatry sits down on the same throne and bows to the same gold. The disease jumped bodies. It did not die with Jeroboam. It found a new host. But it gets stranger, because Baasha's house falls exactly the same way. His son Elah takes the throne. And one night, while Elah is getting drunk in the house of his own steward, a chariot commander named Zimri walks in and kills him. And Zimri does to Baasha's family exactly what Baasha did to Jeroboam's. Total slaughter. Not one male left alive. And now Zimri is king for 7 days. 7 days. Because the moment the army in the field hears that Zimri has murdered the king, they refuse him. They proclaim their own general, Omri, as king instead, and they march on the capital. And Zimri, barricaded inside the palace, watching Omri's army pour through the gates, understands there is no way out. So he walks into the innermost room of the royal house, and he sets it on fire. Over his own head. He burns the palace down around himself rather than be captured. 7 days on the throne of Israel. And then a self-made pyre. Stop and count with me. Jeroboam's whole family, murdered. Baasha's whole family, murdered. Elah, murdered. Zimri, dead in the flames, a king for 1 week, 4 households gone. And every one of them, right up to the man burning in the palace, kept the golden calves that started it all. That is not politics. Politics changes when the king changes. This is something else. This is a pattern that survives every attempt to end it, because every man who ends it keeps the very thing that causes it. And we are only getting started. Let me stop the story for just a moment, because you have already seen enough to feel the shape of this thing. 4 kings in, 4 households wiped out, and 1 object, 1 calf of gold at a border town called Bethel, still standing through all of it, untouched, while the men who bowed to it kill each other by the dozen. If this is the kind of history that grips you, the patterns most people skim right past, the details hiding in the parts of the Bible nobody reads out loud, then take 1 second right now and subscribe. That's all it takes. It tells me to keep making these, and it means the next one finds you. And here's a number I want you to carry into the second half. 19 kings ruled this kingdom, and roughly half of them were murdered. So keep a tally in your head as we go. Ask yourself, king by king, did this one die in his bed? Or did this one die on a blade? You are going to be surprised how the count runs, because we are about to meet the most powerful family this kingdom ever produced, a dynasty so famous that a foreign empire will name the entire nation after them. And it is going to be this family, the strongest of them all, that shows you exactly why strength was never the thing that could break the pattern. Here's the part nobody tells you. The general's name was Omri, the one the army chose over Zimri. and Omri did something none of the kings before him had managed. He held on. He fought a rival for the throne for several years, won, and then he built something that would outlast him by centuries. He bought a hill from a man named Shemir, and on that hill he raised a brand new capital city. He called it Samaria. It had walls a battering ram could break its teeth on. It became the beating heart of the northern kingdom for 150 years. And here's how powerful the House of Omri became. Long after Omri was dead, the great empire to the east, Assyria, the superpower of the ancient world, did not call the northern kingdom Israel in their records. They called it the House of Omri. This one family stamped its name so deep into the region that a foreign empire used it as the name of the whole nation for generations. So this is the peak. This is the strongest, most stable, most respected dynasty the North ever produced. And what does the Bible say about the man who built it? It says, Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did worse than all who were before him. Worse than all before him. He set a new record, and then his son broke it. Because Omri's son was Ahab, and Ahab married a woman. Her name was Jezebel, and she was not an Israelite. She was a Phoenician princess, the daughter of a king who was also a priest of Baal. And when she came north to marry Ahab, she did not leave her gods at the border. She brought Baal with her, wholesale. She put hundreds of Baal's prophets on the royal payroll, and then she began one by one to hunt down and kill the prophets of the God of Israel. Not the calves anymore. Not a shortcut to the right God. This was a different God entirely, moving into the palace and taking the throne room. Under Ahab and Jezebel, the stakes stopped being about one family's crown. Now it is the soul of the entire nation on the table. And this is the exact moment God raises up the prophet Elijah, the fire on Mount Carmel, the showdown with Baal's prophets, the drought that cracks the land. If you know any story from the northern kingdom, you probably know that one. But watch what it costs. It takes the greatest prophet of the age calling down literal fire from heaven just to slow Ahab and Jezebel down. Not stop them, slow them. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because God finally sends a man to end the house of Omri for good, and that man is a soldier named Jehu. Jehu is a chariot commander, and God has him anointed king in secret with one mission: wipe out the entire house of Ahab. And Jehu does it with a ferocity that is hard to read even now. He kills Ahab's son, the reigning king, with an arrow through the heart. He has Jezebel thrown from a palace window. He orders the execution of 70 of Ahab's sons and has their heads delivered to the city gate in baskets. He hunts down the worshippers of Baal, gathers them into Baal's own temple under a false promise of a great festival, and slaughters every one of them inside. Then he tears the temple down and turns the ruins into a public latrine. Jehu is the purge the kingdom had been waiting 200 years for. He is zealous. He is thorough. The Bible even records that God commends him for carrying out judgment on the house of Ahab. Here, finally, is a man strong enough, ruthless enough, righteous enough in his fury to break the pattern. And then you read the next lines. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin, the golden calves that were in Bethel and in Dan. Read that again. He did not turn from the golden calves. Here is the man who killed a king with his own bow, who wiped out 70 princes, who executed every priest of Baal in the kingdom and demolished their temple with his bare political will. And that man, that reformer, that righteous butcher, walks out of the smoking ruins of Baal's temple and leaves the golden calf at Bethel exactly where it stood. Do you see it now? Jehu hated the branches of the sin. He hated Baal, the new god, the foreign import, the obvious enemy. He killed it root and stem. But the original sin, the calf, the thing Jeroboam built 200 years before he was born, Jehu never even saw it as a problem. It was too familiar. It had been standing his entire life. It had been standing his father's entire life. You do not tear down the thing that has always just been there. And here is where history hands us something almost unbearable. Because of every king in this entire kingdom, 19 of them, there is exactly one we can still see with our own eyes. Not a painting, not a guess, a carving made by his enemies that survives to this day in the British Museum. It is called the Black Obelisk, and carved into it, in a row of ancient tribute bearers, is a figure bowing all the way to the ground, forehead pressed to the dirt, before the emperor of Assyria. The caption cut into the stone beside him reads, Tribute of Jehu, son of Omri. The one king of Israel history lets us actually look at is on his face, in the dust, paying off the empire that will one day erase his entire kingdom. He broke Baal, he kept the calf, and he bowed to Assyria. The pattern didn't just survive Jehu, it used him. After Jehu, the kingdom has maybe a century left, and it spends most of it bleeding. Because now we reach the part I told you to keep a tally for, the final stretch of kings, and I want to walk you through it fast, because that is exactly how they lived, fast and then dead. There is a king named Zechariah. He is the last of Jehu's line, and he reigns for 6 months before a man named Shallum murders him and takes the crown. Shallum sits on the throne for 1 month. 1 month. Before a man named Menahem kills Shallum and makes himself king. And Menahem is so brutal that when one town refuses to open its gates to him, the Bible records that he ripped open the pregnant women of that town. That is the caliber of man wearing the crown now. Menahem dies, and his son Pekahiah takes over. Pekahiah lasts 2 years before one of his own officers, a man named Pekah, murders him inside the palace fortress. And Pekah rules until a man named Hoshea assassinates him. The last murder in the chain. Count them with me. Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah. In roughly 20 years, the throne changes hands by bloodshed again and again and again, 5 and 6 times over. The crown is not being inherited anymore. It is being stolen at knife point, over and over, by men who will themselves be stabbed by the next man in line. The throne of Israel has become a knife passed hand to hand, and every hand that holds it bleeds out. And the man left standing at the end of all of it, the very last king the northern kingdom will ever have, is Hoshea. Now, remember what I promised you at the very beginning. Remember the calf, the gold at Bethel, catching the sun on the morning Jeroboam first bowed to it. By the time Hoshea takes the throne, that calf has been standing for roughly 200 years. It has watched 19 kings come and go. It has outlived every single one of the men who murdered to reach it. 9 dynasties have risen and been slaughtered around it, and it has not moved an inch. And Hoshea, the last king, the final chance, standing on the edge of the abyss with the Assyrian army already gathering on the horizon, Hoshea does not tear it down. 200 years. And not one king, not even the last one with the empire at his gates, will pull down a calf. And here's why that should stop you cold. Because you know this. Not from history, from your own life. You have seen a sin get passed down. Maybe you have watched it in your own family. The temper that your father had that his father had before him. The bottle. The silence at the dinner table. The way the men in your line just leave. The wound nobody will name out loud. That gets handed from one generation to the next like a family heirloom, and everyone can see it, and nobody tears it down. Because it has always been there. Because you cannot attack a thing you have stopped being able to see. That is Jehu. That is Hoshea. That is the whole northern kingdom. They could see Baal because Baal was new. Baal moved in from outside, and they could point at it and hate it and kill it. But the calf? The calf was home. The calf was the thing that had always just been there. And you do not tear down the thing that has always just been there. You defend it, you inherit it, you hand it to your children. And so the end comes exactly the way the pattern always promised it would. Hoshea makes one last desperate gamble. He stops paying tribute to Assyria and secretly begs Egypt for help. Egypt does not come. And the Assyrian emperor, betrayed, marches his army north and locks the city of Samaria, Omri's mighty fortress on the hill, into a siege that lasts 3 years. 3 years of starvation behind those famous walls. And then the walls break. In the year 722 before Christ, Samaria falls. And the Assyrians do what the Assyrians did to conquered peoples. They empty the land. The record of the Assyrian king Sargon still survives, and in it he boasts of the exact number of people he dragged out of Samaria and scattered across his empire, 27,290. He marches them east, out of their homeland, and settles them among strangers, and they are never, ever heard from again. 10 tribes. Gone. Not defeated, not exiled to return one day like Judah would. Dissolved. scattered so completely into the empire that history simply loses them. To this day, we call them the 10 lost tribes, because that is what happened. They were lost. And the Bible does not let us blame it on Assyria's army. Listen to the verdict it renders over the smoking ruins. The people of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They did not depart from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight. They did not depart from them. They were not conquered because they were weak. The House of Omri was one of the strongest in the region. They were not conquered because they were outnumbered. Every nation faced Assyria. They were not conquered because their walls were thin. Samaria held for 3 years. They were conquered because for 200 years, across 19 kings and 9 dynasties and 100 assassinations, not one man would walk to Bethel and tear down a calf. The calf outlived them all. Every king who bowed to it is dust, and the sin they would not name, it wrote its name across the grave of an entire nation. So what do you take with you from a kingdom where nobody survived? 3 things. The first is this. The thing that destroyed the northern kingdom was never politics. It was never the strength of its armies or the height of its walls or the size of its enemies. 19 kings tried 19 kinds of leadership. The fearful one, the general, the brutal one, the reformer with a sword. And it did not matter, because every one of them made peace with the same sin. The pattern was never about the man on the throne. It was about the calf nobody would touch. Change the king all you want. If you keep the calf, you keep the curse. The second is harder, because it points at you and me. You can hate a sin and still keep it. Jehu proved that. He hated Baal with a holy fury, and he never once turned his eyes toward the golden calf, because the calf was the water he had always swum in. And that is the most dangerous sin in any life. Not the one you are fighting, but the one you have stopped being able to see. The one that feels less like a sin and more like home. Ask yourself honestly, tonight, what is the calf in your life that you have simply learned to live beside? And the third is the one I need you to sit with. A sin you refuse to name does not die when you die. It gets an inheritance. Jeroboam built a calf out of fear one morning 3,000 years ago, and he was dust within a generation. But that calf went on to kill kings for 200 more years and to march 10 tribes into a darkness they never came back from. The thing he would not tear down outlived him and outlived his children and finally buried them all. That is what an unbroken pattern does. It does not stay in the life that started it. It reaches forward. It writes its name in your children and in theirs until someone is finally willing to walk to Bethel and tear the thing down. Maybe that someone is you. Now I want to hear from you. Out of all 19 of these kings, the general, the butcher, the reformer, the last desperate gambler at the gates, which one do you think came the closest to breaking the pattern? And why do you think that even he still didn't? Tell me below. I read them. Because here's the last thing, and then I will let you go. That calf at Bethel outlived every single king who ever bowed to it. 19 crowns, 9 dynasties, 200 years of blood. And the gold was still standing when the last of them was dragged away in chains. That is what a sin does when nobody will name it. It buries everyone but itself.